You might be able to make the case that Week 12 has arguably been the best week of NFL football in this 2025 NFL season. 8 games came down to a single score, and look no further than the matchup between the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles, where the Cowboys overcame a 21-0 deficit in the first half to come back, scoring 24 unanswered points, winning 24-21, tying their largest comeback in franchise history. Dak Prescott, George Pickens, the defense in Dallas, which has been abysmal before their bye week, has put 2 great weeks of tape on film for sure. Since the Cowboys acquired Quentin Williams, they have allowed 43 rushing yards on 19 carries in 2 games this season with Quentin Williams. So that's just making a huge defensive effort there. You saw the 2 fumbles that not only the Cowboys defense forced, but their special teams too. And offensively, George Pickens continues to arguably him, Jackson Smith-Njigba in Seattle, those 2 receivers. But right now, George Pickens, you can make the argument that he's the best receiver in the league and even the best receiver on his team right now, but we're not going to start that controversy. But George Pickens had 9 receptions on 9 targets for 146 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown too. Dak Prescott continues, in my opinion, he had a great 2023 season, but this is the best that we've seen Dak Prescott play right now at the age of 32 years old in his prime. And this Cowboys team has a shot to make the playoffs in the NFC at a 5-5-1 record. They're going to have a really intriguing matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs on Thanksgiving, which really means a lot for both squads. We saw the Chiefs themselves come back, overcoming a 20-9 deficit against the Indianapolis Colts in Week 12 to get their 6th win of the season, moving to 6-5. They're not trying to lose any ground on that race in themselves, and even though they might not win the AFC West for the first time in the Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid era, they can still make some noise in the playoffs, and anyone still, even as a wild card, wouldn't want to see the Chiefs in the playoffs. So I think they still have a lot of opportunities to play well, even though they've had their inconsistencies on offense. You look at the matchup that started up NFL Week 12, Houston Texans, where they had 8 sacks on the Buffalo Bills. Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson Jr. just going crazy in that matchup. Davis Mills playing solidly and competent, advancing the Texans to a 6-5 record after they started off 0-3. They were 3-5 at one point. And the Texans are making things very interesting in the AFC South, right behind the Jaguars and the Indianapolis Colts. Just a lot of things to talk about. We saw Shedeur Sanders make his first start and play solidly within the offense, but really the biggest story from that game is Myles Garrett, as he had 3 sacks in that game, and he's had 7 sacks in the past 2 games. He already has 18 sacks on the season. He only needs 5 sacks to break the all-time sacking record, which is tied with TJ Watt and Michael Strahan. So Myles Garrett continues to be arguably the best defensive player in the league, maybe just definitively, not even arguably. You look at Los Angeles, the Rams, as they defeated the Buccaneers, winning 34-7 on Sunday Night Football. Matthew Stafford is not only probably the MVP favorite right now, he also became the first quarterback this season to 30 touchdowns, and he's also thrown 25 touchdowns since his last interception. So he's just playing at a high level. You can make the argument that the Rams are the best team in the league right now, and just a lot of great football being played and so many intriguing storylines. With that being said though, guys, before we get further into this NFL Week 12 recap, make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram/Twitter and X at SwaggyRuss and TikTok at SwaggyRuss02 for shorts, reels, content, all things to that nature. Also, stay tuned for this week as well for my power rankings video, where we'll be ranking all of these teams from 1 to 32 as we do every week. And with that being said, let's talk about what we learned from NFL Week 12.
This motherfucker is locked.
Kicking off NFL Week 12, we had, well, really an inspiring performance from the Houston Texans, especially from a defensive perspective, as they beat the Buffalo Bills again at home 23-19, moving to a 6-5 record, and the Bills fell to 7-4. This is actually a game that I was attending in terms of working and stuff like that, you know, being from the Houston area, and it was just crazy how loud it was, the crowd intensity. Houston has some of the greatest fans in the world. I'm not saying that because I'm just from Houston. I'm not a Texans fan, by the way, but I mean, it's just crazy there, and it really felt like a playoff game. But I mean, that defense was on full display. I think it's safe to say with the Houston Texans defense, the Denver Broncos, and the Seattle Seahawks defenses, those 3 units possessed the 3 best defenses in the league, and it was on full display. Freaking Will Anderson Jr., man. First and foremost, the Texans had 8 sacks as a whole and 3 total turnovers, 2 picks, both by Kalen Bullock, playing at a high level. I think really one of the most underrated safeties in the league, and him only being in his 2nd year, by the way. So just the future is bright for him, and he really is a player that I think encapsulates the Texans swarm defense. But he had 2 picks on the game, which also led to Houston scoring more points. So it was just a really good overall performance from that defense that, like I said, has been the best in the league. And I talked about the Texans having 8 sacks in this game, but let's get into it from an individualistic standpoint. Will Anderson Jr., I think he was player of the game. He had 6 total tackles, 2.5 sacks. Then you look at other players. Tim Settle Jr. had a sack. Danielle Hunter had 2 sacks, making it already 11 for him on the season. Derek Barnett had a sack. Mario Edwards Jr. also had a sack in himself too. That unit was just playing at a very high level. A lot of people don't talk about it because the Texans, I mean, they have struggled, at least from an offensive perspective, the past couple of years. But I mean, by the way, in 2023 and 2024, they They won the AFC South 2 straight times. The Texans defense is one of the best in the league, and I've heard a lot of people kind of not necessarily discrediting the Texans defense, but really not talking about it enough because they've been looking at it from a, oh wow, why did Josh Allen play this bad or something like that. Nah, man, this Texans defense has been able to do this to every single team they played against this year, quite frankly. They ranked as the best in based on total yards allowed per game, points per game, and they're also third in sacks and interceptions. Like, this is no surprise, and people need to wake up. I'm glad that the Texans defense was able to show that on full display on national television, because now people know what they're fully capable of, and it seems like CJ Stroud is going to return in week 13 in a really huge and pivotal matchup against the Indianapolis Colts, which is going to make us know how the potential AFC South is going to go. It just really bodes well for them right now. But Davis Mills, though, as a backup quarterback, he's really held things down, though. While CJ Stroud has been out, has won 3 consecutive starts. In this game, I think he was solid. More so in the first half, the Texans offense was better. In the second half, they weren't really great. But for the game, Davis Mills completed 16 out of his 30 passing attempts for 153 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns. Woody Marks had 16 carries for 74 rushing yards. And Christian Kirk had a receiving touchdown, alongside with Jaden Higgins having a receiving touchdown and Nico Collins having 3 receptions for 55 receiving yards too. So just a really great performance from the Houston Texans. Their defense really was the biggest flashing and standing point from this game. For the Bills, though, like I said, people shouldn't be talking about Josh Allen just playing uncharacteristic. Obviously he did, but I mean, this Texans defense forces you to do that naturally. And I think, if anything, from a Josh Allen perspective, what are you doing? There was at times where he would just continue to hold on to the ball, running around in circles and stuff like that, taking a way more yardage away from a potential play if he would have got initially sacked at a different spot or just thrown the ball away. I mean, it just didn't make sense to me what Josh Allen was doing, and he just really struggles against the Texans. That's evident. His first playoff start in 2019 was against the Texans. They lost that. We saw last year in Houston as well too. I believe it was week 4 or week 5. The Texans won that matchup at home. Josh Allen only completed like 9 out of his 30 passing attempts. Like, I don't know. Just Josh Allen just does not play well against the Texans, and that's just a fact at this point that we've seen throughout his career. The best things for the Bills throughout this game was James Cook having that rushing touchdown early in the first quarter, as he had 17 carries for 116 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. I believe that they could have given him the ball a little bit more, try to aim for him having 20 plus carries. From a Joe Brady perspective, their offensive coordinator, I think that they got a little pass happy at times too, and that came to bite them. As I mentioned earlier, Kalen Bullock had 2 interceptions. Khalil Shakir, though, I mean, he had a solid game from a statistics standpoint, having 8 receptions for 110 receiving yards. That hook and ladder play in the fourth quarter was nice too, to try to give them a chance and opportunity to score at the end of the game to try to win it. But ultimately, like I said, the Texans defense held things down, and they were able to stop the Bills and get a 23-19 lead. Man, like I said, they play against the Colts, and we know the Colts have been one of the best teams this year so far in terms of a record perspective, having one of the best offenses in the league and a solid defense as well too. But that's going to be a really entertaining matchup, and if you want to look for a potential matchup where Daniel Jones might look like his New York Giants self, don't look past the matchup against the Texans next week, because that's going to be a really intriguing one to watch. But like I said, biggest takeaway from this game is that Texans defense is one of the best in the league, and that's why the Houston Texans have a real shot not to only be an AFC wild card that no one really wants to see, especially opposing offenses, but ultimately they still have a shot to win AFC South. Now, moving on to the Sunday slate, we have a matchup where the Kansas City Chiefs won in comeback fashion, getting a huge, much needed win over the Indianapolis Colts, winning 23-20, moving to a 6-5 record, and the Colts lose their 3rd game of the season as they move to 8-3. Man, at first for the Chiefs, you saw in their first drive, Patrick Mahomes threw an interception to Latu, which ended up setting up the Colts' first touchdown. The Chiefs had their struggles pushing the ball downfield. Their offense was stagnant at times too, but ultimately they were able to persevere in overtime, and their defense held things as well, so the Colts couldn't come back and win the game. So it was just a really good win for them. And running the football has certainly been a struggle for the Chiefs this season, but they made sure that they fed Kareem Hunt a lot, especially with Isaiah Pacheco out. Kareem Hunt ended up having 30 carries for 104 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Alongside of that, though, Rashid Rice, he was able to get right in this game, as he had 8 receptions for 141 receiving yards. Xavier Worthy added in 4 receptions for 59 receiving yards, and Travis Kelce had 4 receptions for 43 receiving yards. And I will say, though, for Patrick Mahomes, like I said, the offense kind of struggled at a lot throughout this game. But like I said, ultimately they were able to get points when they needed to. And in this game, he dropped back a lot. He completed 29 out of his 46 passing attempts for 352 passing yards. No touchdowns and 1 interception that I mentioned. He was also sacked 4 times too. So like I said, the Colts, they were playing well on both sides, but similarly to the Kansas City Chiefs, in the second half, the Colts offense really stagnated, and they weren't really able to do much compared to what they did in the first half after scoring those 14 points. Daniel Jones, he kind of had a less than stellar game for sure. No turnovers, but he completed 19 of his 31 passing attempts for 181 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor was also neutralized to an extent in this game, as he only had 16 carries for 58 rushing yards. Michael Pittman Jr. had a touchdown, and the other touchdown came from Andrew Ogletree. But besides that, it was a really battle of the trenches in this game throughout it, and that's why it needed to go to overtime and go into extra periods. The Chiefs really needed this one. Like I said, it was a much needed win for them. They have a great pivotal matchup against the Dallas Cowboys, who are also trying to get back in playoff position, especially after that huge comeback win against the Eagles that they had. So that's going to be a really good game on Thanksgiving. You can join your family and watch that game for sure. That might end up being the most watched game for the 2025 NFL season between the Cowboys and the Chiefs. But it's a really good win for Kansas City. Their playoffs hopes are still certainly alive, and I think they will continue to be, even if they lose another game. We saw a couple of years ago they were 11-6 and still ended up winning the Super Bowl too. So I wouldn't count them out of it necessarily. They have some big games coming up next. They play against the Cowboys, Texans, things of that nature as well too. But overall from this game, I think it was a really good win for the Kansas City Chiefs, especially over the Colts team, who has been one of the best in the league. It re-emphasizes, in my opinion, and lets people know that this Chiefs team is still capable of winning at a high level, despite the struggles that they've had this season. The final score of this game was close, as the Seattle Seahawks won 30-24, and at one point the Seahawks led 30-10, but we knew what was going to happen in this game, and the Seahawks move on to an 8-3 record after beating the Titans, and the Titans fall to an abysmal and uninspiring 1-10. Just gross work. But let's talk about it from the Seahawks perspective. After throwing 4 interceptions in that Los Angeles Rams matchup, losing 21-19 in week 11, Sam Darnold was able to play better in this game as he completed 16 out of his 26 passing attempts for 244 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns. He had a great connection with Jackson Smith and the Jigba, who was easily the player of the game in this one, alongside with the defense playing well too. But as JSN had 8 receptions for 167 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. Zach Charbonnet also added in a rushing touchdown too, and Kenneth Walker had 11 carries for 71 rushing yards. And just overall, I would say a great performance from this team. From an offensive perspective, having one of the best offenses in the league, being electric too. Defensively though, they were able to get to Cam Ward at a high level. Patrick O'Connell had a sack, Leonard Williams had a sack, Byron Murphy II had a sack, and Derek Hall had a sack. So this team was just absolutely flying, and they play a lot of complementary football, even in that game against the Rams. Yes, Sam Darnold threw 4 interceptions, but they still had a chance to win the game at the end of the game. I mean, they missed a field goal, but they only lost by 2 points, so that says a lot about them. For the Titans though, I mean, we really don't have to spend too much time on them. Cam Ward, he didn't necessarily play awful. He completed 20 of his 42 passing attempts for 256 passing yards and 1 touchdown, but like I said, that Seahawks pass rush was able to get to him as they sacked him 4 times. And Ward also had a rushing touchdown as well too. But this team is bereft of talent, bereft of weapons and stuff like that, and really bereft of direction. So I mean, there's just not really a lot to talk about the Titans. They're eliminated from the playoffs alongside like the Giants and the NFC too. So the biggest thing to take away from this game is that the Seahawks, despite losing to the Rams in a close fashion that they did in week 11, they were still able to get a get-right game. Even though the final score was 30-24, they still were able to get a win in this one, moving on to an 8-3 record and being one of the best teams, not only in the NFC, but in the NFL overall. Now we shift gears to NFC North matchup between the Green Bay Packers and the Minnesota Vikings, and the Packers won this handily, winning 23-6, advancing to a 7-3-1 record, and the Vikings fall to 4-7, man. It's just a really far downward slope that the Vikings have went on this season after the successful year they had, at least from a regular season standpoint in 2024. JJ McCarthy continues to struggle. He's thrown an interception every single game that he has started this year, and it was nasty work in this matchup against the Packers. Completed only 12 out of his 19 passing attempts for a whopping 87 passing yards and 2 interceptions that came from Isaiah McDuffie and Evan Williams. Really, the biggest thing from this game is to take away what the Packers did. I'll talk about the Vikings in a second, but the Packers won this game, so we have to shed light on them, because even despite they've had some offensive inconsistency issues this year, they've still been able to win games. I mean, they have 7 wins right now, and that's by no mistake or accident. Jordan Love, I mean, he didn't play necessarily the greatest in this game. Also, Josh Jacobs was out in this one too, so that didn't help in terms of a running game standpoint. But Emmanuel Wilson, he stepped up in this game, and he had 28 carries for 107 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Christian Watson, he's been really looked 100% since he came back a couple of games ago from his ACL injury, as he had 4 receptions for 49 receiving yards. Not really too much from an explosive standpoint on the offensive side, but it ultimately didn't matter. Jordan Love, I mean, he only completed 14 out of his 21 passing attempts for 139 passing yards. But with that though, they still were able to play great on the defensive side, especially. I mean, we know that Packers have one of the best defenses in the league. They have Micah Parsons on the defense, as he had 2 sacks in this game. Isaiah McDuffie also had a half sack alongside with his interception. I mentioned Evan Williams had an interception. Devontae Wyatt also had 2 sacks, and Warren Brinson had a half sack too. So this defense was flying, made things extremely difficult for JJ McCarthy, and it shows that you have a book on him. Not only is JJ McCarthy unsuccessful in terms of getting the ball downfield, but when you get pressure to him, he's going to compromise. Obviously, being a first-year starter for him in his second year, it just wasn't great, as he was sacked 5 times. So ultimately, the biggest takeaway from this game is that the Green Bay Packers, they're still one of the best teams in the league, despite some of the issues that they have had this year, really mostly on offense, at times on defense in terms of a run-stopping standpoint. But in this game, that was not the case. They only limited the Vikings to have a total of 93 rushing yards on the game, and they played at a high level, and it was a great win for the Green Bay Packers. A surprisingly close game in this one, as the Baltimore Ravens did win 23-10 against the New York Jets, moving to a 6-5 record, and the Jets fell at 2-9. But I say surprisingly close because, I mean, the Jets, they scored first in this game. John Mechie had a receiving touchdown from Tyrod Taylor, things of that nature as well too. And I mean, I'll say though, Tyrod Taylor, he didn't play necessarily a terrible game. Completed 17 out of his 28 passing attempts for 222 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. But I don't think he played bad, especially in his first start coming in for Justin Fields. They weren't really able to run the ball at a high level, having 16 carries for 44 rushing yards. And Breece Hall did have 4 receptions for 75 receiving yards in the receiving game, so that helped. But like, the Jets gave the Ravens a run for their money in terms of making the game closer than what a lot of people expected it to be. But with that being said though, the
Ravens were able to get things right eventually. Lamar Jackson didn't necessarily have the best game. He completed 13 out of his 23 passing attempts for 153 passing yards. Derrick Henry was kind of neutralizing the running game as well too. He had 21 carries, but only for 64 rushing yards. But those 2 touchdowns really made a good difference. So I mean, that helped. They were able to make some decent drives from that perspective. But their passing game for the past couple of games hasn't been necessarily the most explosive, but their defense has continued to improve. They were able to sack Tyrod Taylor 3 times, as Jermont Jones had 1.5 sacks, and Mike Green had a sack as well too. And then TJ Tampa had their interception, and Kyle Hamilton, he was all over the field as he had 10 tackles in this game as well too. And same thing with Roquan Smith as he had 11 tackles in this game too. So I mean, not necessarily the most explosive game from the Ravens offense, but they were able to play complementary football throughout the latter point of the game, and they were able to win over a team that you should get a win over for sure. So the Ravens, I mean, they're still very much not only in the mix of the AFC North, because now they have the same exact record as the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that time is coming down to where they're going to be playing against each other soon in the division. Those stakes are going to be on the line, but for the Ravens, you're just glad to walk out of this game with a W as they move to a 6-5 record. This is another surprisingly close game as the Detroit Lions went to overtime with the New York Giants, but they were still able to get a win, winning 34-27 as they now have a 7-4 record, and the Giants fall to 2-10 as they're officially eliminated from the playoffs. But we all saw that writing on the wall a long time ago, and man, the Giants, they played well in this game at first. They were up 10-0 at the end of the first quarter. They had a 27-17 lead in the fourth quarter, but like I said, the Lions, they were able to come back, and then in overtime, Jahmyr Gibbs had that huge rushing touchdown to essentially win the game and end it all. And talking about Jahmyr Gibbs, he went crazy in this game from a rushing standpoint and receiving wise too. He accounted for a total of 264 yards, but in the running game, he had 15 carries for 219 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a great game as well too, as he had 9 receptions for 149 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. Jahmyr Gibbs also, alongside with his 2 rushing touchdowns, had a receiving touchdown as he had 11 receptions for 45 receiving yards as well too. And just really, that was a great thing for them. Like I said, the Lions defense, they kind of struggled at first to contain a Jameis Winston, and also it didn't help that Jared Goff was getting pressured by the Giants defensive line. As I mean, Jared Goff, he had a pretty solid statistical game as he completed 28 out of his 42 passing attempts for 279 passing yards, but he was sacked 3 times and he threw an interception in this game. But like I said, they were able to persevere in the second half for the Lions and come back. They're a team at this point, the past couple of years, with the success that they've had, they've taught themselves how to win in different ways, and they were able to do that. But I will say, on the opposing side though, Jameis Winston, he put up a solid fight. He completed 18 out of his 36 passing attempts, so not the highest completion percentage, but he threw for 366 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 1 pick, and was sacked once. Also, they had a great trick play touchdown in the first half to Wan'Dale Robinson, who had an absolute game as well too, like in Amon-Ra St. Brown, as Wan'Dale Robinson had 9 receptions for 156 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. Theo Johnson also added in 3 receptions for 77 receiving yards. Isaiah Hodgins had a receiving touchdown, and Jameis Winston had a trick play receiving touchdown as well too. So I mean, it was just a really great game and a lot of high scoring in this matchup. But like I said, when Jahmyr Gibbs had that huge rushing touchdown on the first play of overtime, kind of knew what was about to happen, and Aiden Hutchinson ended up having a great sack to end the Giants trying to come back in overtime, and that was a great win really for the Lions collectively, as they had a couple of tough games the past few games, as they lost to the Vikings, they had lost to the Eagles, only scoring 9 points I believe. But this is a great win for them. And then on Thanksgiving Day, they play against the Green Bay Packers, a divisional rival who they will certainly want to get a win and get revenge against, quite frankly, because we know how the Lions looked very pedestrian in that week 1 matchup against the Packers too. So just overall, a really good win for the Lions and a good fight, I would say, for the New York Giants. No matter how close the games continue to be, the Chicago Bears continue to find ways to win, and that was the case in this matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers, as the Bears won 31-28, as they now have an 8-3 record and they continue to sit atop of the NFC North, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are 6-5. Yeah, Aaron Rodgers missed this game and Mason Rudolph started. I don't think Mason Rudolph played necessarily terrible, but when you're playing your backup quarterback, especially against a Bears team that is just continuing to really figure out a lot of things in their first year under head coach Ben Johnson, it's just a credit to the Bears and the type of sensational season that they have had this year. And talk about what Ben Johnson has done with Caleb Williams. Caleb has played way more efficiently this season, not doing too much, and he's completed 19 out of his 35 passing attempts for 239 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and only was sacked once. The running game wasn't necessarily utilized the best. I mean, Kyle Monangai did have 12 carries for 48 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, so that helped there. But DeAndre Swift only had 8 carries for 15 rushing yards. But receiving wise though, and defensively for the Bears, I mean, that's where they were able to do some solid things. DJ Moore had 5 receptions for 64 receiving yards. Rome Odunze had 3 receptions for 53 receiving yards. Colston Loveland had 4 receptions for 49 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. And defensively, Nashawn Wright, he had an interception in this game as well too. The Bears defense, they've been very opportunistic and have had a great amount of turnovers this year. Shout out to Al Harris, defensive backs coach, who has really had that defense in terms of a placement and knowing where the ball will be to help create turnovers. He's made a huge change and difference for that Bears franchise from a defensive perspective. And also, let's talk about what other defensive players did in this matchup against the Steelers, as Montez Sweat had 2 sacks in this game. He also forced a fumble and he recovered the fumble as well too. too. They just played well, and this is a really good matchup. I mean, talk about the Steelers defense as well too. TJ Watt ended up strip sacking Caleb Williams, and that led to a touchdown, and that was solid for them. But like I said, the Bears, I mean, they were able to still find ways to win. That's been a huge thing, as they've won a plethora of one-score games this year. Like I mentioned, for the Steelers, Mason Rudolph wasn't necessarily terrible, but he wasn't the greatest. He completed 24 out of his 31 passing attempts for 171 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, and was sacked 2 times. Kendall Gainwell had 10 carries for 92 rushing yards in this game, and Pat Freiermuth had a receiving touchdown. But besides that, and the defense playing well, I mean, this was just a classic, really good matchup between both teams this season for sure that are really good. And the Bears, like I said, they just continue to find ways to win. They only won 5 games last year. They've won 8 right now, and they're just playing really good football right now in midst of them maybe having a million one-score wins. But I mean, they're finding ways to win, and that's different from what they were able to do last year. And this game, this was a really good win for the Chicago Bears. A lot of really good games this weekend. This continued to be another one as New England Patriots beat the Cincinnati Bengals, winning 26-20, as they now have 10 wins with a 10-2 record, and the Bengals fall to 3-8. Like, real quick about the Bengals, man. I mean, obviously Jamar Chase was out of this game for spitting on Jalen Ramsey in that Steelers matchup in Week 11 when they lost that one, and their offense was really mostly neutralized in this matchup as well too. Bringing Joe Burrow back on Thanksgiving, does that really make sense now? Like, I mean, you're 3-8. Last year they were 9-8. I mean, possibly, yeah, they could win 6 games in a row, but will that be enough to make the playoffs? I don't even think so, and I don't think that they will win 6 in a row. But besides that, as I digress on that, the Patriots, this is a team that continues to be one of the best in the league. I mean, we know that they don't necessarily have the hardest schedule, and we'll see in the playoffs how really battle-tested they are and if they can win against really good teams in the AFC, even though I think the AFC overall right now is pretty wide open. You have to give credit to where credit is due with Mike Vrabel, with Drake May, as he's continued to play. Despite the interception in this game, being sacked once in this matchup, I think that he played really solid against this Bengals team, as he completed 22 out of his 35 passing attempts for 294 passing yards and a touchdown. The past couple of games, Travion Henderson in Week 10 and Week 11, in both of those matchups, he combined for 5 total touchdowns. In this game, it wasn't as electric, as he had 18 carries for 66 rushing yards. But, I mean, receiving-wise, Hunter Henry really stepped up, as he had 7 receptions for 115 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown in this matchup too. And defensively, Marcus Jones had a pick 6. Go Cougs. Yes, sir. He has been one of the best, not only defensive players in this league at the cornerback position, but also in terms of a special teams player as well too. So shout out to him for that. Harold Landry II had a sack. And overall, this Patriots team, even though the Bengals started off solidly, they were able to neutralize them and slow them down. Joe Flacco completed 19 out of his 37 passing attempts for only 183 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and was sacked once. Chase Brown, though, in the running game, that's how the Bengals were really able to find more success, as he had 19 carries for 107 rushing yards. And their leading receiver for the Bengals was Andre Yoshivas, as he only had 4 receptions for 61 receiving yards. T. Higgins was also able to be keyed in with Jamar Chase absent, as Higgins only had 5 receptions for 31 receiving yards. And now T. Higgins being in concussion protocol, that's just another bad beat for the Cincinnati Bengals. So a really good close matchup in this game, but the better team won. The New England Patriots, like I said earlier, do y'all think that there's any substance or point to bring back Joe Burrow on Thanksgiving? I mean, they play against the Ravens, so that's going to be a really great matchup. And the Ravens, they're trying to continue to stack wins together so they can try to win the AFC North and continue to build to being one of the best AFC teams that we've known them to be the past few years, after starting off 1-5 earlier this year. But we'll see what the Bengals end up deciding to do. But overall for this game, it was a really good win for the New England Patriots.
And what do you hope to show against this Raiders defense, your teammates, yourself, and these Browns fans with your play today?
I'm who they've been looking for.
Perfect timing. Yes, sir. Shedeur Sanders got his first start as a Cleveland Browns quarterback, and they were able to win this game over the Las Vegas Raiders, winning 24-10, getting their 3rd win of the season, moving to a 3-8 record. And the Las Vegas Raiders fall to 2-9. And we'll talk about the Raiders in a few, because they ended up firing offensive coordinator Chip Kelly after this game. But for the Browns, man, Shedeur Sanders, he's the first quarterback, I believe, since 1999, the Browns at least, in his first start, to win his first start as a starting quarterback. And I mean, he had a lot of flashes. He had an interception in this game too, and he was sacked once. But I think that Shedeur Sanders, I mean, he played fine within the Kevin Stefanski system in his first game, and that's a good thing for them too, because in their next game against the 49ers, he'll get his 2nd start, and we'll see how he can continue to ascend. But I think he played fine. He had a great first half completion, throwing off to the right side off of one leg was very impressive. I mean, Shedeur has a lot of arm talent. He has a lot of talent in general, and hopefully for his sake and just rooting for him in general from an outside perspective, that he can get things together. Because even from the Browns perspective, if you can hit on a 5th round quarterback being your starting quarterback for the future, especially for the next few years, make him on a cheap, super cheap rookie deal, that'll be perfect for them. But talking about Shedeur, he completed 11 out of his 20 passing attempts, 209 passing yards, 1 touchdown, like I said, was only picked off once and only had 1 sack, and had a quarterback rating of 87.3, so not bad at all. Quinshon Judkins also had 16 carries for 47 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. And receiving wise, Dylan Sampson, the rookie running back, had 2 receptions for 59 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. And Isaiah Bond, another rookie, the wide receiver, had 2 receptions for 58 receiving yards, and Harold Fannin had 4 receptions for 40 receiving yards too. So solid play on their offense, but really their defense was able to make things easier for their offense, because the defense accumulated 10 sacks in this game. Yes, 10 sacks. Just an absolute all-out effort. Raiders have been one of the worst teams, if not the worst team in the NFL this year. The Browns have too, but the Browns put that on full display that they're not as bad as them. Myles Garrett had 3 sacks in this game as well, mind you, and he had 4 sacks last week in week 11 against the Baltimore Ravens. He has had 7 sacks in the past 2 games. He already has 18 sacks. He's 4.5 sacks away from the all-time sacking record that's shared between TJ Watt and Michael Strahan. Yeah, that's about to disappear. That's about to be Myles Garrett's in full display, and I wouldn't be surprised if he reached like a near 25 sack number. Guys, we're about to be in week 13 and he already has 18 sacks. That's absolutely phenomenal. Alongside of that, Myles Garrett had 5 tackles on the game and 2 forced fumbles. Just an absolute bludgeoning of a game. Arguably, he's the defensive player of the year again this year. And I mean, even though the Browns haven't been great this year, you can't penalize his performance with how phenomenal of a player, defensive player, and Hall of Fame player that he is. So he's played great. Also, other players that had sacks on the game was Devin Bush, Isaiah McGuire, Michael Hall Jr. had a half sack, Malik Collins had 2.5 sacks and a fumble recovery. Shelby Harris had a half sack, Jerome Baker had a half sack, Cameron Thomas had a half sack. So 10 sacks in total for this Browns defense. Offensively, with Shedeur Sanders in his first start, he played solidly, and it just overall put a great complete performance on tape against the Raiders, who, like I said, have been one of the worst teams in the league this year. Geno Smith didn't throw an interception in this game, so I guess that's positive from the offensive perspective, but like I said, they ended up firing their offensive coordinator, Chip Kelly, and they just struggled overall this year. They drafted Ashton Jeanty with the 6th pick overall, and you know, in the right system, if you have an offensive lineman in place to help protect and draft in the first round, for example, like in 2023 when the Falcons drafted Bijan Robinson, that was a good move. When the Lions drafted Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round of 2023, that was a good move. Have a good running back, young running back behind that old line. But this offensive line for the Raiders is one of the worst in the league. And when you draft a running back, it's very minimal because Ashton Jeanty is tied with Saquon Barkley this season. I know, which is insane. We'll talk about the Eagles later, with the most negative yards this year from a rushing perspective. So this offense just has been struggling for sure. Brock Bowers is one of the best tight ends in the league, but he hasn't had the numbers that he's had since he's been back healthy this season, and they've just been one of the worst teams in the league. So overall from this game, shout out to Shedeur Sanders getting his first start as the Cleveland Browns quarterback, and Myles Garrett being the best defensive player in the league with 3 sacks in this game, already having 18 sacks on the season. That's the biggest takeaway from this game, and it was a great win for the Cleveland Browns. A really close and competitive game between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Arizona Cardinals, but the Jaguars will end up winning 27-24, getting their 7th win of the season as they move to a 7-4 record, and the Cardinals fall to 3-8. And that's been the story of the Cardinals this year. They have a 3-8 record, but I believe that really in all of their losses this season, most of them, they've only been 1-score loss. They've found themselves with a 3-8 record, and I mean, it was a very, very up and down, more so really down than up performance for Trevor Lawrence in this matchup. We saw Walter Nolan on the defensive side ended up getting a touchdown in that game early, thanks to that nature, as Trevor Lawrence threw 3 interceptions in this game. He completed 18 out of his 30 passing attempts for 256 passing yards, 3 touchdowns with, like I said, 3 interceptions, and he was sacked 3 times. So, like I said, a very up and down performance for him, more downs than up, but that didn't end up ultimately mattering to the extent of them losing the game, because I believe the Jaguars, I mean, they've had their struggles collectively as a team this year, but we saw in week 11 they blew out the Chargers, winning 35-6. Things of that nature as well too. This team has a lot of talent, just sometimes, especially from an offensive perspective with Trevor Lawrence, they struggle with consistency, but they were able to persevere throughout this game. I think Travis Etienne Jr. ran the ball pretty well. He had 15 carries for 86 rushing yards. Brenton Strange had 5 receptions for 93 receiving yards. Parker Washington had 5 receptions for 71 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. Then Jacoby Myers had a receiving touchdown, and Travis Etienne Jr. had a receiving touchdown as well too. So I think their offense was able to get things going in stretches that ultimately put the Cardinals away. The Cardinals, though, like I said, they hung in there and fought. Jacoby Brissett has absolutely been launching the ball since he's been starting at quarterback. I mean, he hasn't been perfect, but I mean, he's played solid, and he's been able to at least move the offense to put it in better positions. He completed 33 out of his 49 passing attempts for 317 passing yards and 1 touchdown in this game. They didn't really have a running game at all in this one, so that's why he had to drop back that much and almost drop back 50 times. Michael Wilson, though, he had a really good game, had 10 receptions for 118 receiving yards. Trey McBride had 9 receptions for 79 receiving yards, and Greg Dortch had 6 receptions for 53 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown too. So I mean, both of these defenses, they really ended up showing up. Jalen Thompson for the Cardinals had a sack. Buda Baker had a half sack. Akeem Davis-Gather had an interception alongside with Garrett Williams, and Buda Baker having interceptions as well in themselves. And like I said, Walter Nolan had that fumble recovery for a touchdown. But ultimately, the Jaguars, they ended up doing enough to win a game. And I mean, we all can take away Jaguars are the better team, especially defensively. They still had one of the better defenses in the league. Dennis Gardeck had 1.5 sacks. Devin Lloyd had 1.5 1.5 sacks. Josh Hines Allen had a sack. Devon Hamilton had a sack too, alongside with Antonio Johnson. I mean, this team is really good defensively. Just sometimes, like I said, they struggle with consistency overall from an offensive perspective. And when that happens, your defense continues to get thrown back on the field and they're going to end up letting up eventually. But in this game, that was not the case. The Jacksonville Jaguars got a really good win. Even though, like I've talked about throughout every single week, there's a lot of coaches that are potential coach of the year candidates and only one can win ultimately. But I think Liam Cohen, he's done a great job in his first year as the Jaguars head coach, really bringing them from a place that they weren't last year because they were one of the worst teams in the league. But in this one, they got a 27-24 win, getting their 7th win of the season, moving on to a 7-4 record. Duval. Just an inspiring NFC South matchup here between the Atlanta Falcons and the New Orleans Saints, but the Falcons ended up winning 24-10, getting their 4th win of the season, moving to 4-7, and the Saints fall to 2-9. We're not going to spend too much time on this game because I don't want to be negative, but I mean, in all intents and purposes, and if we're being real, these teams just do not matter right now. But I will give props to the Falcons as they ended up playing a solid game. Kirk Cousins completed 16 out of his 23 passing attempts for 199 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. He was also sacked 3 times by the Saints defense as well too. It's going to be the Kirk Cousins show for the rest of the season as Michael Penix Jr. is out for the year with a knee injury. Bijan Robinson had 14 carries for 70 rushing yards in this game as well too, and Darnell Mooney had 3 receptions for 74 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. David Sills also had a receiving touchdown as well too. And defensively, Xavier Watts had an interception. James Pierce Jr., the rookie, had 1.5 sacks. Rook Roro had a sack. Jalen Walker, the other rookie, had a sack as well too. So I believe this defense, and really overall, the Falcons played a complimentary football game to help get the win. Tyler Shuck struggled in this matchup. He completed 30 out of his 43 passing attempts for 243 passing yards, but no touchdowns. Had an interception, and he was sacked 5 times, as I mentioned. So the Falcons defense was able to get to the quarterback at a solid rate. Chris Olave had 9 receptions for 70 receiving yards, and defensively, the Saints were able to get an interception with Justin Reed. They forced a fumble with Cameron Jordan. But besides that, I mean, the Falcons controlled this game. I mean, these have been 2 of the worst teams in the league. I mean, the Falcons, to a lesser extent, they've been more so inconsistent. Wouldn't say they're necessarily one of the worst teams because they have the talent, but they haven't played it together. But ultimately and overall, this is a matchup that you would pretty chalk for the Falcons to win. And for the Saints, they continue to struggle. They have now a 2-9 record. They're one of those teams that, I mean, it's going to be like a week or 2 before they're officially eliminated from playoff contention. But the Falcons, they ended up getting this win 24-10.
Yes, sirski! Yeah! 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 Come on, man. Send them trash pitches back to Philadelphia. Yeah! Come on, man. Oh, y'all talking to me in my DMs, texting me, oh, Cowboys gonna lose, all that. Eagles, all that. Come on, man. Stop playing. Let's keep going. Keep sacking these W's. That was for Marshawn. Let's go, bro. Let's go. I'm usually laid back, but I'm lit about this. Yeah! Come on, man. Let's go! We lit! Yeah!
Guys, so as you all know on my channel, I'm very objective and I'm very open and honest about who my teams are. From the NBA perspective, I'm a Rockets fan, but I'm also fans of Devin Booker and Luka Doncic individually. Also Forever D-Rose fan. NFL, I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. And in this one, I'm not going to be too subjective in this one. I'm just going to say, how about them Cowboys? And there's still a lot of season to be played. Their season is not over yet. Anyways, okay, going back to an objective standpoint, guys, what a game. And I mean, there's a lot of different perspectives that you can talk about from this Dallas Cowboys and Philadelphia Eagles perspective. The Eagles choked the lead, the Dallas Cowboys persevering. But I mean, overall, the Dallas Cowboys won this game 24-21, moving on to a 5-5-1 record, being 500 now, and the Philadelphia Eagles fall to 8-3. And there's a lot of things to talk about in this matchup. First and foremost, this is the Eagles' second loss this year with a 2-touchdown lead. For the Dallas Cowboys, they tied their largest comeback in franchise history with 21 points being down. And talk about the Dallas Cowboys defense. A lot of people have talked about it, and myself as well too, as a fan and just overall as a journalist slash sports analyst. I've talked about their defense being one of the worst in the league, but we can all acknowledge and know that the additions of a Quinnen Williams, the Marvin Overshown coming back, Logan Wilson being into the fray defensively, Javon Revel, a lot of players coming back from a health standpoint has really helped revitalize and change this Dallas Cowboys defense. And as a result, they're playing better and playing a physical style of football that you've seen the past couple of weeks. And in that Raiders game, a lot of people wanted to see it against a competitive team, one of the best teams in the league, in the Eagles, and they absolutely out-physicaled the Eagles offensive line in this. Yeah, Lane Johnson was hurt. They had different injuries and stuff like that too. Regardless of that, the Cowboys looked great on both sides of the football. And at first, they really struggled from an offensive perspective. You know, penalties, all things to that nature as well too, really held the Dallas Cowboys back, and the Eagles, they were able to capitalize off of that. That's what good teams do. They capitalize off of the opposition's mistakes, and that's what the Eagles did. But in the end of the second quarter and going to the second half, the Cowboys really flipped the switch. And I mean, we're gonna have a conversation for sure about it because George Pickens, I mean, I'm ready to say he's been the best wide receiver in football this year. I know Jackson Smith-Njigba, he's played amazingly this year too. Both of those receivers have already passed 1,000 receiving yards on the season, but George Pickens has been insane this year, man. And Pickens had 9 receptions for 146 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown in this game. And I think CeeDee Lamb, he's still one of the best receivers in this league this year, but his drop issues, especially against the Eagles this season, they've been very glaring. I mean, to be one of the best wide receivers in the league, you have to catch the ball. That's literally a requirement. And in this game, he had 4 receptions for 75 receiving yards. He did have a nice 48 reception on Cooper DeJean, which is good in the second half, but he has to play better because, I mean, the Cowboys offense is doing this without CeeDee Lamb playing at his best. Imagine when he does do that throughout this stretch and games coming up on Thanksgiving against the Chiefs, against the Lions, games to that nature as well too. This can be very pivotal and mean a lot for the Cowboys, and this was a great win for them. Dak Prescott, besides throwing that interception that he had in the first half, he played an amazing game. He completed 23 out of his 36 passing attempts for 354 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. Like I said, just that 1 pick and that 1 sack. They were very opportunistic as well too. From an offensive perspective, Javonte Williams had 20 carries for 87 rushing yards. Still been one of the most solid running backs in the league this year. Dak Prescott also had a rushing touchdown as well too. And defensively, like I said, they absolutely out physical the Philadelphia Eagles. I believe they had 12 pressures on Jalen Hurts in the game. Might have been a little bit more because that stat was during the 4th quarter. They bullied their offensive line. Osa Odigizua had that huge crucial sack on that 3rd and 2 to help the Cowboys get the ball back to ultimately lead to that Brendan Aubrey game-winning field goal drive. Like I said, Quinnen Williams played great, but also defensively, players like a Sam Williams punching out the football from Saquon Barkley to force a fumble. Also special teams wise, the Dallas Cowboys forcing a fumble that Trent Seg, the long snapper for the Dallas Cowboys, ended up recovering. This is a great performance and really a persevering effort from the Dallas Cowboys to win this game. And I mean, from the Eagles, their final 8 offensive drives in the game, it was a punt, missed field goal, fumble, punt. So Cowboys defense, regardless of the things that they struggled with the first 2 months, when that Raiders game happened, their defense really flipped the switch and they allowed 0 points in the second half after allowing 21 in the first. So it's a huge, great comeback effort from the Cowboys in this, and they definitely have a shot to be playoff contenders, I would say. I mean, maybe it's a long shot to say that they can come back and win the NFC East unless the Eagles have a colossal collapse, which they did have a couple of years ago. So I'm not saying that's not possible, but the Cowboys, they have a great shot to make the playoffs this year. They have a huge game on Thanksgiving, like I said, against the Chiefs. That's going to be arguably the most watched, not only Thanksgiving game, but just NFL regular season game of all time on Thanksgiving against Kansas City. That's going to be a really good one. Then they play against the Lions, and then they have games against the Chargers, Vikings, teams to that nature as well too. So we're going to see where they're at, but they have a great opportunity, and this is a great win, getting their 2nd win in a row. Something they hadn't done all season. It had been win, loss, win, something like that, but now it's been 2 consecutive wins. Let's see if they're able to make that 3 wins on Thanksgiving in week 13. So just a great win for the Cowboys. For the Eagles, their offense just continues to struggle. Yeah, they played solid in the first half, but I think that was more so of Dallas, you know, being too aggressive with Brian Schottenheimer going for it on that 4th down, which set up the Eagles in great field position, things of that nature as well too. The offense struggled for the Cowboys, so ultimately the Eagles were able to, you know, capitalize eventually. They had a deep pass to Devontae Smith, which was nice from Jalen Hurts, and AJ Brown got what he went from a stat perspective, having 8 receptions for 110 receiving yards and receiving touchdown, but they lost the game. So I don't know, man. I mean, this offense isn't necessarily great for them. Jalen Hurts, from a statistics standpoint, didn't play bad, but this team, they're just super flawed on offense. Their defense is really good, and like I continue to say, one of the best in the league, but you can't keep making up for stuff, and they keep putting band-aids on things for their offense, which has been very vanilla throughout this season. So overall from this game, the biggest takeaway is the Dallas Cowboys got a huge, much-needed win, and this can be another win to help galvanize them and potentially go on a playoff run, as they're playing really good football, complimentary football, the first time this year, the past couple of games all season. It's a great win for Dallas Cowboys. And also, Dak Prescott became the all-time passing leader in passing yards for the Dallas Cowboys in his game too. So really creating a great legacy as the Dallas Cowboys quarterback. The main thing that needs to do is win in the postseason. We'll see if that happens. I believe that, I mean, the Dallas Cowboys, they make the playoffs this year, that'll be a good thing for them, especially considering where they're started. But the next couple of seasons, that's where really a potential Super Bowl window can open for them. But in this game against the Eagles, it was a really good win, and the Cowboys move on to a 5-5-1 record. It was highly anticipated, but overall it ended up being underwhelming, as the Rams, I hate to say it because my dad's a Bucs fan, put BTA to the Buccaneers, winning 34-7, as the Rams are now 9-2 and the Bucs fall to 6-5. This game was pretty much over in the second quarter. Cade Otton had that, I think, questionable fumble that ended up being returned for a touchdown for the Rams. I think that was an incompletion, but regardless of that though, Baker Mayfield also ended up hurting his left shoulder in this game too. The Rams though, we'll talk about them from their perspective in a second, but defensively, Baker Mayfield, while he had 2 interceptions in this game, he was also sacked twice. Teddy Bridgewater, when he came in the game, it really wasn't anything to be inspired by. He had 2 sacks on the game as well too. He only completed 8 out of his 15 passing attempts for 62 passing yards. And yeah, this offense just overall stalled. When you don't have your starting quarterback in the game, I mean, that's going to show. The only good highlight for the Bucs was Baker Mayfield throwing a passing touchdown to Tez Johnson. So I mean, that was the only good thing for them in this game. But flip side for the Rams though, they continue to be one of the best teams overall in the league, and their defense continues to get better and better and better. And you just saw it. I mean, it was a really game for Matthew Stafford that he put on cruise control. He completed 25 out of his 35 passing attempts for 273 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks, was only sacked once. Arguably, Matthew Matthew Stafford is the MVP. He's the first quarterback this season to reach 30 passing touchdowns as well too. He's just been playing great. At the age of 37 years old, it doesn't matter. He's still one of the most talented quarterbacks that we've ever seen. Puka Nacua had a really solid performance in his game as well too, having 7 receptions for 97 receiving yards. Devontae Adams had 5 receptions for 62 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. Kobe Parkinson also had a receiving touchdown as well too. And like I mentioned, defensively, Kobe Durant had an interception. Emmanuel Forbes Jr. had an interception, and Kobe Turner and Jared Verse, both of them individually, had 2 sacks in the game. So both of them combined for 4 sacks. They just had all-out pressure and really just whooped the Bucs offensive line. So just a great performance from the Los Angeles Rams on both sides of the football, and they dominated, and this game was really over at halftime. And they move on to a 9-2 record, and you can make the real argument that the Rams are not only the best team in the NFC, but from a battle-tested standpoint and just overall the type of pedigree that they have, you can make the argument that the Rams are the best team in the NFL right now.
Definitely a less than stellar Monday Night Football matchup between the San Francisco 49ers and the Carolina Panthers, but the 49ers won, moving to an 8-4 record as they beat the Panthers 20-9, as they're 8-4 now and the Panthers are 6-6. And these quarterbacks really struggled, especially in the first half for Brock Purdy. He threw 3 interceptions in the first half, but ultimately it didn't end up mattering. At times, Kyle Shanahan just ended up playing safe and putting the ball in Christian McCaffrey's hand, even in the running game at times. Brian Robinson Jr. too, to help the offense just proceed, but also on the opposing side, Bryce Young ended up having a share of struggles and the offense in general, because like I mentioned, the Panthers forced Brock Purdy to 3 interceptions in the first half alone, but they were only able to score 3 points in the first half and only 9 points on the game. But for the 49ers, like I said, Brock Purdy, he threw 3 picks, but he completed 23 out of his 32 passing attempts for 193 passing yards and a touchdown. Alongside of that, Christian McCaffrey in the running game had 24 carries for 89 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, and in the receiving game, he had 7 receptions for 53 receiving yards. He leads everyone in the league right now, including receivers, with the most receptions in the league, with 81 receptions right now through week 12. So that's an amazing stat in himself. It just shows his versatility in terms of the run game and also receiving game as well too. George Kittle had 6 receptions for 78 receiving yards, and Brian Robinson Jr. had 7 carries for 40 rushing yards, and Jawan Jennings had 5 receptions for 41 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. But I mean, besides that, offense wasn't necessarily great for the 49ers. Their defense, though, they were able to hold things down. They've been able to continue to bend, not break, especially with the injuries they've sustained. Robert Saleh is doing a great job with that young defense. Jair Brown had 2 picks on the game for the 49ers, and he also had 5 tackles. Mustafa had 7 tackles in the game. Clyde Farrell had a sack too, and just overall they were able to, quite frankly, put the Panthers in jail. The only massive offense for the Panthers was a touchdown connection between Bryce Young and Tedero McMillan, and on the game, Tedero McMillan only had 2 receptions for 35 receiving yards and that receiving touchdown, and Rico Dowdle led the Panthers in receiving yards with 4 receptions for 36 receiving yards, and he led them in rushing with 6 carries for 38 rushing yards. Really, I mean, they've honed their identity on running the football, the Panthers have at least, and they only ran the ball 9 times total between Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard, and Bryce Young had 4 carries too. And for the game, Bryce Young in the passing game only completed 18 out of his 29 passing attempts for 169 passing yards, that 1 touchdown I mentioned to Tet, and 2 interceptions, and was sacked once as well. So not necessarily the greatest game on Monday Night Football, but the better team ultimately won in the San Francisco 49ers. Panthers fall to a 500 record at 6-6, but they had the opportunity to be 7-5 and take over the #1 spot in the NFC South. They still continue to be right behind the Buccaneers in that division, and for the 49ers, they still continue to hang in the mix, not only in the NFC playoff picture, but also in the NFC West. I mean, a lot of people probably favor, of course, the Rams. I think they're probably going to win the NFC West, and then the Seahawks are right behind them. But the 49ers are very much so still in that wild card mix in the NFC. So just overall, not the prettiest game, but they were able to find the way to win, even though Brock Purdy has thrown 7 interceptions in 4 games played this year. It didn't matter, and they were still able to win. And right now, they currently hold the final playoff spot in the NFC. So what do we learn from NFL Week 12? Like I said, there was just a lot of good games, a lot of one-score games, like I said too. And just as we're now approaching Thanksgiving, going into Week 13 this upcoming Thursday, we pretty much have an idea and frame of what teams are going to be competing to not only be in the playoffs, but ultimately have a shot to contend in for both sides, in the NFC and the AFC. Like, I think right now, from a team perspective, the NFC has the better teams. Right now, they're recording this video, the Rams have the 1 seed. You look at the Eagles behind them, the Bears, Buccaneers, Seahawks, Packers, and 49ers. The Rams right now are the best team in the NFC. You can make the argument that they're the best team in the league, and then for the AFC, it's a toss-up right now, because I still believe that even though the Broncos, the Patriots, the Colts are up there, I wouldn't be surprised at all if none of those teams are in the AFC Championship game, quite frankly, or the Super Bowl. But it's just wide open. It continues to be, and that's why the season has just been ultimately spectacular in itself, and I've never seen anything like it throughout these years, because you look at last year with the Chiefs and the Eagles, those were some favorite teams, even the Lions to an extent, but we know that they had a lot of injuries, and right now, if you look at the Lions, they're still in the playoff
playoff hunt, and they have a 7-4 record. So that just is a testament to how competitive not only the league is, but like I mentioned, the NFC. You have a team that's 7-4. It's currently the AC right now. That's insane. And you look at like a team like the Panthers, no one expected them to have a 500 record right now going into week 13. The Cowboys are still very much so in the mix, even though they have a tough schedule coming up on Thanksgiving against the Chiefs and the Lions and teams to that nature. They still have a shot. So we're just seeing a lot of high level football right now, and it's a beautiful thing, and it's gonna make an interesting run throughout the stretch. So y'all let me know in the comments down below what your current thoughts are, what you learned from NFL week 12. Like I said, it's a beautiful time to be alive, and especially for this upcoming slate that we have on Thanksgiving. Talk about the Lions and Packers, huge implications for not only the playoffs but also the NFC North. Then you have the Cowboys and the Chiefs, huge implications for both of those teams trying to get into playoffs in their each respective conference. And then finishing off with the Bengals and Ravens as Joe Burrow returns after a 2-month hiatus due to that turf toe injury, and Jamar Chase returns after that 1-game suspension. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of things on the line, and we have the Black Friday game between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Chicago Bears. So yeah, like I said, a lot of entertaining football on the way. Y'all let me know what y'all learned in the comments down below. With that being said though, guys, before I conclude this video, like I said, let me know what you learned. Make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram / Twitter and X at SwaggyRuss, and TikTok at SwaggyRuss2 for shorts, reels, all type of content and things of that nature. A lot more NFL content on the way. Like I said, stay tuned for my power rankings video. More NBA content is on the way. I promise. I just been busy working and stuff like that too, trying to juggle everything. So you all know, I mean, it's gonna take time, but trust me, as the NBA season continues to get more intriguing, you know, NBA Cup play and stuff like that too, I have a lot more stuff to talk about from that perspective as well. So y'all just stay tuned, guys. But I love y'all. Keep Jesus Christ at the center of your life always. Know that you matter and you have great purpose. Make sure that you tell people that you love them. Y'all have a good one. Happy early Thanksgiving. Y'all keep being blessed, and I'm thankful and grateful for y'all. Peace.